Let me start with what you're not supposed to start with an apology. I didn't realize until Krishna asked me to do this that it's been 5 years since I've done anything like this. It seemed like about, I don't know, 6 months or so. And it's just amazing how fast the time goes by. And it's actually maybe kind of a good thing because it really gave me a way I could structure this short talk, because I was looking back on my hard drive and came across this. This is the talk I gave back at the end of 2007. It was probably about the same time of year, and as I was looking through that, I was kind of gratified at how many things that we had actually done that we said we were going to do. And I promise it won't be 5 years again before we do this again. I thought the best way to set up what's going to be happening in the next year and beyond was to backtrack a little bit and talk for a moment about some things that have happened, a little bit of history, a little bit of background, and because I think it's necessary to really understand where we've been to see where we're going. We were really busy back in 2007. We were just cranking it out because we had made some really big plans and I think really solid plans, and then this happened, and that's always hovering in the background. And anytime you're talking about the past few years, that when the world kind of fell apart and at the end of 2008 and into 2009, it was a scary moment and affected everything, and especially affected businesses, and it really affected not-for-profits. And I like to just keep that in mind, because everything we've managed to do has been against that background. And I think we kind of woke up one day and said, gosh, we're still here, we're basically okay. And but one reason it's been 5 years since I've done this, and it's taken us 5 years to do some of the things that we've done, is because of the complications of the world. And I think we were, in 2007, we were making plans based on one set of assumptions, and those assumptions changed rather quickly. And for me, it was, I live on off of Alcoa Highway, and the way I would calm myself down after watching the news in the morning, which was so horrible in the fall of 2008, I would look at the line of cars coming, waiting to get on Alcoa Highway. If you live down there, you know what I'm talking about. I thought, well, people are still going to work. I still can't get on Alcoa Highway. Probably we're going to be okay. And in fact, we were. And Knoxville held up pretty well compared to a lot of places. And as an institution, we've had some of our best years ever, actually, since the beginning of the Great Recession. And I'll come back to that in a minute, because that has to do with some other plans that we're making. Anyway, just wanted to, if you needed reminding, a lot's happened in the last 4 or 5 years. Back in 2008, these are the kind of questions we were asking ourselves. We were really thinking hard about our identity. Who are we? What do we do? Why are we here? And those are really fundamental and difficult questions to answer. And I think one reason we've been successful over the past few years, and I think we've really come up with a good set of answers to those questions. It is always a moving target. You never really get there, but I think we've moved a lot closer to where we should be. And we did articulate, I think, a very viable and powerful strategic vision for and a statement of identity about who we are as an institution. We'll come back to that in a minute. We were concerned, even in the good old days before 2008, we were concerned about sustainability and our financial capacity. And I'm happy to report that you see back then our total budget was about $1.5 million. Last year, our total revenue was about $1.8 million. So we've actually really had our best year ever last fiscal year, and we expect that to continue. And that's for all kind of reasons. I think it has to do with what a solid community we're in. I think it has to do with having a great staff, with good board leadership, and all the pieces have really worked together to keep us in good shape. back in 2007 and now, it's always a challenge to build audiences, to reach out to new audiences, to always be mindful of who's not here, to never be satisfied with the numbers that we have. And we have good numbers. We run up to 60,000 visitors, and people reach via outreach programs every year. It's a very, very healthy number, but it could be more. And we want to make sure that we're reaching the right people. Are we getting to, are we gearing too many things to people my age, not enough to people who are a generation younger? That kind of question. And that is always, we're always in the process of rethinking and re-examining and I hope being self-critical as an institution about who is coming in and why and who's not coming. Similarly, we were aware in 2007 that we weren't engaging the public the way we really needed to, that we weren't offering the kind of exhibitions and the kind of programs that people could really connect to. Some people could, but not enough people could, and this was one of the big factors that went into our sort of articulating that self-identity. We were thinking about what we were collecting. Are we collecting the right things? Are our collecting priorities what they should be? Do we want to be more focused on what we can actually afford as opposed to what we'd like to have and maybe can't afford? This was a big question that was kind of swirling around. And at this point, we were already working very actively to articulate some of those issues. And one of the directions we were moving was to make the Knoxville Museum of Art the Knoxville Museum of Art. That sounds sort of simple-minded, but that was a big step for us as an institution, an important one, that since 2008, since we opened Higher Ground, which we'll come to in a minute, we really have been the Knoxville Museum of Art. We are about this area, this region, this city, whether in a historical sense or in terms of what's happening right now. And I think that was a fundamental shift, a fundamental institutional shift for us, and a really important one. And I think one that has really served us well in many ways. Here's Catherine Wiley, of course. She inspired that whole idea. When I saw this in the basement, I thought, well, gosh, who's this? I've never heard of her. Who's this genius that was living here up on Fort Sanders in the early 20th century? And I go on the assumption you don't get work of this quality out of nowhere, that this had to come out of a very sophisticated, cosmopolitan, active environment of artists, of patrons, of public appreciation for what artists could do. And in fact, as we developed this new installation that we called Higher Ground, and I say we, I mean Stephen Wicks, our curator, in fact, that was the case. And Catherine Wiley didn't come out of nowhere. We have a rich artistic heritage that goes way back into the 19th century, even further back if you think about the Native American background. But in terms of sort of European style fine art, high art traditions, there's a long tradition here, a long record of exhibitions, of successful artists, of artists who are really engaged in a meaningful way with the wider world. That there was nothing provincial or backward or backwoods about this part of the world, and I think that's an image that we carry around with us that really is an accurate or a fair image. That was the year we really, I think, in a big way embraced who we are as an institution and kind of put the thorn rims front and center. That was the one thing that we carried over from the Doolin Gallery. And that if you're of a certain age and grew up in Knoxville, those have kind of a special place in your heart because you were dragged to the Doolin as a child to see the thorn rims. And thanks to the generosity of Sherry Lee, we were able to have them conserved, relit, reinstalled, and we're so proud of them now. They look so beautiful, and they're so much a part of our institutional history, of this community's history, and and I'm really glad that we're able that we really have embraced them. They sat in storage for many years because we were really ambivalent about that part of our history, and I'm glad we are secure enough as an institution to really glory in that episode. In fact, last year and now this year, also on a bigger scale, we have the miniature guild. It's the National Guild of Miniature. National Association of Miniaturists are decorating some of the rooms in period appropriate teeny tiny decorations, and I've learned hanging around them, like you see, like little tiny furniture is very expensive too, and wow, okay. We have a very vigorous and healthy and active current scene. Artists like Andy Saftel, artists like Richard Jolly. I could name dozens of others that choose to live here and are supported by a network of artists and galleries. We're part of that support system of patrons, of people who buy art. We think of it as a kind of an ecosystem that takes a lot of different parts, and we want to be an active part and a very positive part of that ecosystem, and that's one thing I think where we've made a lot of progress. We want to be the place that tells the story that only this institution can tell. Nobody else is going to do it. The East Tennessee History Museum also has some terrific holdings in local artists, but they do show some of this stuff. But this is the art museum, and we're the only ones that are really going to present the story of the visual arts in this part of the world, and we continue to be surprised and pleased to discover new people we didn't know about. That the story is even richer and more interesting than we first thought. So it's been a very when we were making these slides up, this was just something we were thinking about. So, gosh, we hope there's enough here to make something worthwhile, and in fact. There's far more than we can even deal with. So that's been very nice. Another thing we were talking about at that point was continuing what had become a really strong tradition at the KMA of showing contemporary art from around the world. And for a while that was our sole program, and we did some really important, interesting, well thought out exhibitions. And we wanted to continue that. We thought it was important to have that, to be a place where you can see, if you don't go anywhere else, if you just come to the exhibitions here, you have some sense of what's happening out in the bigger world. And then finally, I think I finished that talk talking about North Garden plans, and that's where the recession really sort of put things on hold. We actually that year we hired a very good, very expensive planning firm out of Boston, Sasaki and Associates, who had done the space planning for the Beijing Olympics, to put together a master plan for. We said do the North Garden. They did the whole hillside here, and it was so visionary and so fantastic. And we really thought, well, gosh, maybe. And we said someday we're going to need to expand. Think about where a future building would be and plan around that, so we have sort of a template for the future as we think about expanding, and that's what they did, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But this is we were ready to get going on this big brownfield, what we jokingly refer to as the North Garden. Never got finished. The elm tree that was sort of enshrined here died soon after the building opened, and it's been sitting empty now for going on 25 years, and we would have addressed it already if the world hadn't fallen apart, but we're just about back to that point again, so I'll come back to that in a minute. Here's the sort of the planks of the strategic plan that we developed over the past few years, which has sort of crystallized into our mission statement. It really says who we are and what we do. We celebrate the art and artists of East Tennessee and everything that implies. We introduce new art, new ideas. We engage, educate, and serve a diverse community. we're here to enhance Knoxville's quality of life and economic development, and to operate ethically, responsibly, and transparently as a public trust. And these planks are all really important to us, and I think say a lot about I think of them as a filter through which everything we do has to pass. If it doesn't fit one of these, then we don't do it, and it has served us very well. And that came out of those discussions in 2007, 2008. Again, sort of just quickly reviewing where we've been, just to remind you about Higher Ground, which is in this summer have been open 5 years. It's hard to believe it's been that long, which has become really our flagship installation. I think a really important part of our identity. To me, we have given Knoxville its art history back. I think whether you grew up here or you're new here, whether you're just a visitor, I think anybody can be proud of what has been achieved here by artists for a long time and at a very high level. I think this was a surprise to all of us. This is a painting by Lloyd Branson, who's sort of the godfather of the fine arts in Knoxville that we were able to scratch together the money for at an auction at Case Antiques and buy and get cleaned and reframed. And he had just gotten back from Europe and had been looking at Impressionism and sort of, I don't think anybody here knew what the hell he was doing, but he did, and he never really tried anything just advanced again. But it was so exciting to see this very experimental and very avant-garde approach in the early 1890s in Knoxville, Tennessee, and to see again those connections with the wider world. One of the things that we have found that we enjoy and that our visitors enjoy, that we hear from people, is one of the things I love about this part of the world is the landscape. It's such a beautiful place, and Higher Ground really connects to that in a very direct and obvious way that even people that don't care much about art, they don't know from art, but they love this beautiful part of the world, and there's kind of a natural connection there. And it's wonderful to see how artists from here and from other places have responded to and interpreted and sort of celebrated what has to be one of the most beautiful places on the planet. For me, it's been really gratifying that material that's about 50, 60 years old that has been collected by folks in town from art shows at UT, from local things I got for $5 and $10 back in the day that they've held on to, and because we have promoted what's happened in Knoxville artistically, that's starting to come back to us now, and I think people were kind of waiting to see all this material. A lot of this material is held locally, and people have been incredibly generous with us in sharing the things they've collected over the years. Here's just this Stevens painting, which here's somebody taught at UT. He was well known in the community. People, you will see these around, and they're getting increasingly valuable if you have one. I think they're absolutely beautiful, and we're so proud that these things are starting to trickle back to the museum, because we really want to be the collection of record for all of these artists who have ties to Knoxville. We just and you have to go upstairs and see this, and we'll run upstairs if we have time when we're done, which we might. We've been Higher Ground is always, Stephen is always churning that exhibition. New things are coming in, either new acquisitions or loans from other institutions. He just installed kind of a retrospective of Bessie Harvey, who is a well-known local artist, kind of an outsider artist who, and we do have the collection of record for Bessie Harvey. I think we have more than any place in the world, and it's so nice to see all these things out and looking so good, to really celebrate an artist who she wouldn't find a home anywhere else. It's really because we're here that we're able to feature her, and but I would put her up against, I would put any of our artists up against just about anybody, anywhere. and to me, one of the most exciting and gratifying and just one of those great moments you get in your life was when we acquired this Catherine Wiley painting at Case Antiques back in January for over $100,000. That is a staggering amount of money. I don't want anyone to have the sense that this is something that we do routinely. We never spend money like that. That represents a gigantic investment for us. And it was probably the easiest money that we ever raised. Once people knew that we wanted to keep this in Knoxville, it needed to be in the museum. It was what's more beautiful than a lady and a child in a beautiful landscape, and it just hit all the buttons. And we feel very fortunate that so many people were willing to support this acquisition. Here, this is before. This was actually during the auction, which I barely remember because I was about to expire. I had it cleaned and reframed, and it's up in higher ground now. And it really is kind of the star of that installation. She was a genius. There's just nothing. There's no other way to describe her. The 1,000 colors in that white gown and the bright sunlight, and the way she's able to with the most sort of casual of marks is able to describe sunlight and shadow and temperature and air, and it's a joy to look at. You will never get tired. You will never excavate all that there is in this painting. That brings me to something that might be coming up. This unbelievably beautiful Catherine Wiley just came up at an auction house in Texas. This is a farmhand, I believe, at her sister's farm somewhere in Knox County. I love the fact that it's someone we know. It's an identifiable place here locally. You can look at the landscape and tell it's around here. What you really can't tell from the slide so well is how beautifully it's painted, and just the way she slathers on paint and knows exactly what kind of weird blue tone to put on brown to suggest shadow with a little bit of light coming up, and look at the kind of the grass or the weeds below him, and sort of blue and orange and green and yellow. And we are talking with another institution about the possibility maybe of buying this jointly. It's at an auction. We don't know how much it's going to go for. Stephen has a little bit in his war chest, and we might be able to eke this one out. So keep your fingers crossed. And we just can't stand the thought that the estimate on this is $15,000, and I think that's way low. It's going to go for at least twice that much, and so keep your fingers crossed that we can nab this one, because it's just you can't run in with your hair on fire every day and say, oh, we have to have this, but this one is worth lighting the match for. So, and the thing is, you never know. This might be the last one that ever comes up, ever. It's just hard to tell. This was actually here. What was that? 20 years ago, Stephen? 1990. But the year we opened in a Catherine Wiley exhibition, we hadn't seen it since. So stay tuned for that. And the exciting thing about Higher Ground is it's given us such a sharp institutional focus and identity that people feel good about supporting this kind of acquisition. It makes sense. It's really central to who we are as an institution. And I think everybody shares, there's sort of a communal pride in something like this. This isn't the museum, the museum's, it's ours. And that's really exciting. Just quickly mention, don't miss that we've held over Contemporary Focus for a few days, so we don't have too many galleries out of commission. This has been a great contribution to that ecosystem of local and regional artists. We try to pick artists for whom a show at the Knoxville Museum of Art will be a meaningful boost to their career, and try to get them at the right point in their career. And we've had some wonderful people. I think Stephen and his guys outdid themselves this year in picking a really stellar lineup of people. And that brings us to Currents, which Krishna mentioned before, which is opening this Friday. this survey of contemporary art that whether it's from by local artists or by artists from wherever. And there's a wonderful sort of mix of the local and the distant that I think is very very provocative and very stimulating. That will change a lot. We have a pretty sizable collection of contemporary art that Stephen, our collector circle, and others have built up over the past few years. And I think it's going to be as popular and as engaging as Higher Ground has been. Is Daryl Watterson. Stephen, I forgot who did Joan of Arc, the video. Thank you. It was a wonderful, very moving video. Really tried to incorporate lots of different media, especially new media, like this one. A local star like Jared Sprecher, who's on the UT faculty and has been, we have a number of his works, especially including this big painting that you'll see up there. And kind of wrapped around all this and this idea that we are about this part of the world, we're about new art and new ideas, and in a way kind of bringing those two ideas together in a very dramatic and exciting way is the upcoming installation by Richard Jolly that will be in the Great Hall out here. Here's a sort of overly dramatic picture of Richard at work. Well, it's not overly dramatic because there are flames often, and I just kind of try to stand back. There's something so romantic and so appealing about glass and the making of glass. It's so difficult, it's scary, it's dangerous, and I think it. I can't think of any medium that is more engaging to people and that I'd rather have a big installation. If we had a big painting coming in, it's like, well, that's nice. This is probably the world's biggest installation of figural glass. I can't prove that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. I thought I'd take just a minute and give you a little. It's hard to give you a sense of what it's going to look like because nobody knows except Richard. This has all been done on napkins. I have never seen a drawing by him. So here's what the whole thing is going to look like. Because when he started, he didn't know what the whole thing was going to look like, and it has developed very organically. I half-kiddingly call this Richard's Sistine ceiling, but it kind of is, and the scale is comparable. When Michelangelo started that project, he didn't know what the last panel was going to look like, and the same is true of Richard. Here he is. There's a. Let me forward to. Here we go. That net of birds. Those are hundreds. I don't know, dozens or hundreds of glass birds that are flying up the wall. That will follow the angle of the stairway there in the Great Hall. That gives you, just to give you some sense of what this is going to look like. At the far south end, there's a forest of glass tree, black glass and crystal trees. These two figures which are cast glass in metal frame, and then at the little balcony where the stairway comes in from the second floor, the whole installation jumps out into the room. It'll be suspended from the ceiling. So when you walk in the front door, you'll see it's actually a constellation with stars and birds. And then on the far side, there are more figures and a tree that actually starts right outside the door of this room. Starts on the floor, a big metal tree that then branches out in crystal and black foliage and crystal flowers. It's just, and then another big figure on the end that we'll see. It's been really hard to talk about this, to tell people about it, because it is just. Usually you can say, oh, it's just like something else familiar, and there's nothing else like this, and it makes it really hard to communicate the scale, the difficulty, the kind of crazy size of the whole thing. It's like, well, what's the hardest thing you can do and then put it up in the air above your head? Well, it's glass and metal. What's the heaviest thing you can put together? So the engineering problems are just formidable, the aesthetic problems, the it has been a real odyssey of creative problem solving, and it's been really fascinating to watch Richard work this out. Let me give you just a little sense of that process. These start with drawings, and I don't know if you've seen many of Richard's drawings. They're often very kind of messy. They're very loose and very gestural, and splatters and drips, and that drawing becomes the basis for a metal framework in which there's a metal overlay that reproduces the messy, loose, organic look of those drawings. It's all cut out with a plasma torch, and incredibly difficult to do. Again, no one's ever done this before. It's completely, Richard just made all this up, and he had nothing really to go by or to look at. Here's one of the, here he's making one of the glass trees at the south end of the Great Hall, which are kind of stacked up, kind of like bamboo. You see the crystal buds and fruit on them. Here they are assembling those. They're stacking them in the studio. Everything's being staged out in West Knoxville as they're being made, because he's got to make sure that everything fits exactly to the whatever's less than a millimeter. There's no like guessing, or maybe I can squeeze this in and make it fit. The engineering part of this is just kind of crazy and daunting. Here we are out at the studio last year. I don't know what I'm saying, like I know anything about this. But there you can see some of the trees in their assembled form. Everything stands on a kind of shelf that undulates about 12 feet over your head along the edge of the Great Hall, and that shelf is in that kind of patinated bronze. It's steel, I think, but it's patinated to look like bronze. And there you see there's a moon behind the forest of trees, which is actually glass over gold leaf, and it's cardboard there. And those cardboard figures you see there here are the metal. Here are the finished versions of those, the cast glass and metal with the drawing in quotation marks applied over them. And there you see the birds that go up the side of the room. Here's just a little bit more process. You can see here's on this side of the Great Hall, the theme is, I think it's seduction. I'm probably getting this wrong. Each of these sections has a different kind of very vague theme that has to do with the action or the character of the figures. And so you see the male and female figure. I think of them as Adam and Eve. They're really not. That they're kind of those kind of primordial male and female figures. Here you see the drawing that he starts with. It's on a big piece of canvas laid out that he works on the floor. It's so big that's the only way you can do it. And here's one of his assistants tracing that drawing to make the template for the metal that will be then cut out with a torch. It's incredibly labor intensive, and Richard's had to figure out not only like what is this going to look like, how do I do it, but how do I staff and plan for and pay all these people that I need to help me to do the welding, to do the glass casting. It is just on every level you can imagine. It's just incredibly difficult, and I'm always in awe of how he has figured out how to do this. After that, based on that drawing, then these you can see the hot metal that's being pressed around a wooden form. These are sort of the compartments that are being created in which to cast the glass. And once that form has been made, then they'll pour. There you see the completed framework for the male reclining figure. And that gives you a sense of just how crazy big these things are too. And here they are casting those individual compartments, so then you pour in the molten glass and let it cool, which itself is just an incredibly difficult process. and you know, they can crack if they cool too fast, and it's I love this. The Hay Park took these photographs, and they're just magnificent. This is one of my favorite ones. And there you see the cast glass pieces that have been assembled, awaiting assembly in the metal frame. And here they are putting those pieces in. Again, that guy will be right above this room, as I remember, just on this side of the stairway. And there's the drawing part, the overlay of die-cut metal that replicates the original drawing. And then behind it, you see the armature that holds that up and connects it to. They're going to have to go through the wall and connect to the steel girders that are actually holding the building up. So there's a whole that we've been working with structural engineers on that part to make sure that we can. And the building's way overbuilt, so that's not a problem. But these things are real. There are tons and tons of glass there. Here's one of the branches of the tree that I mentioned that will come up from the floor. And I swear that's going to be the most beautiful part. It just, as I see this being assembled, it'll just make you weep. It's so gorgeous. And here's another process shot going from the drawing to the steel framework. There's the guy that we saw before, and the last panel, sort of, if you think of this in a series of panels, on the north side of the Great Hall is this giant sort of blow up of a head that will be set up kind of like a stained glass window with the metal lines separating the pieces of glass. Imagine how much that guy's going to weigh. So getting ready for this, I mean this, and I've probably done a terrible job of communicating that just how exciting and special and unusual and fantastic this is, and we've all been trying to kind of get our brains around that. We have a lot to do to get our building ready for this. If you look all around the building, you can see evidence of things that have been let go too long for all kind of good reasons. We're going on 25 years. Things just happen to a building. With your own house, if you got to make big investments every decade or two, or things just start to happen. And we're at that stage with this building. And a lot of them are cosmetic, but cosmetic things really matter in an art museum. We've had water issues for years, where water has infiltrated under the floor and wicked up and ruined the terrazzo, and these things are really complicated and scary and hard to deal with. And we're just now getting to the point where we're going to be raising money, so we actually can. We actually have been tearing things up to see how bad the problems are, and this is the furthest we've ever gotten, because you don't want to start pulling things up unless you're prepared to sort of see it through, and we are. And this was last week. They were up on the third floor terrace pulling up pavers and cutting away the concrete to see why water. We found out that terrace up there has been a bathtub for 20 years. It has been storing water because the drains weren't working properly, and it's been really exciting. You don't know how exciting it is if you haven't dealt with all these issues for years. We're finally moving along with the catalyst of the Jolly installation. I should say too that entire installation, what Richard's doing, what's happening here in terms of getting the structure ready, all that is the gift of Ann and Steve Bailey. They are paying for all of that. We couldn't even consider this otherwise, and it is a great, great gift. And partly because it has leveraged all these other things that are going to be happening. It's like, well, the world's going to be coming to Knoxville to see this. We better get this building looking its best. Oops. Which brings us back to the planning that we did back in 2007, 2008. We got the final product from Sasaki just about like the week the stock market crashed. So well, we're just going to put this aside for a little while, but it has really inspired us over those years, and we really keep that vision alive, this grand vision for what could be a stellar showplace. And we charge them with giving us a design for the North Garden with the idea that someday there will be a new building out there. We don't know where, and they considered several options. We don't have the money for a new building, but we want to plan this with the idea that someday we'll be able to expand our building, and that's what they did. I don't know if you can read this very well, but you're looking at the bottom of that slide is World's Fair Park. And I figure this is a multi-generational plan. We might be long gone before this is all done, but I think it'll all happen. It's wonderful to have a template like this as we can do one piece after another. What we're talking about right now in preparation for the Jolly installation is to do baby step 1 of the Sasaki plan, which is to complete the North Garden. And I've got a slide, yeah. Complete the North Garden, redo our entry plaza, as we fix up the building. This is a kind of a conceptual design from Sasaki about what the North Garden without a new building could look like. And you see kind of a ramp, that kind of zigzag element. You can see the sort of fuzzy cars there. That's where our parking lot is currently. On the left side is our current building, just a slice of our current building. It's really hard to look at these and connect them to that big grassy field out there, but that's the same place. That green area with the zigzag kind of ramp coming down, that's the footprint of a future new building. And I think what we end up, we're working with the architects right now on kind of a more refined conceptual plan. I think what we end up with will look something like that, with some kind of ramp arrangement to get you from the parking lot to there's a big grade difference like everything else in Knoxville. Some kind of hardscape, some kind of plantings, some kind of water feature. I hope within a few weeks we're going to have something on paper that we can start showing around, which is really exciting, and use that to raise money. So I hope before the Jolly installation opens in April of 2014, we're committed to that date, that this building, the surroundings of this building will look completely different. And I think that's a really exciting idea. At the very least, I think there'll be bulldozers and piles of dirt out here. And we might not be done by April 2014, but we will be underway. And that's a function of how the fundraising goes. All this we're kind of wrapping up into what we're calling the 25th anniversary campaign, which is to take care of all the issues with this building, which is not very glamorous, but it's really important. We've got to replace some things, got to excavate and undo some things, redo them, complete the North Garden, set up a fund for art acquisitions, which is really critical for us. If we don't get that Catherine Wiley, I'm going to be really sick over it, but it really is kind of a reminder why we need an art acquisition fund. And we're hoping to set up a fund of $1 million, so we'll have as much as $1 million. So we'll have that, and we can move quickly when something great becomes available. We need to grow our operating endowment and our programming education endowment. We have about $3 million now, which is great. It needs to be about $8 million to generate enough to really give us the kind of operating room we need to make sure our staff salaries are competitive, that we can offer staff the kind of training and development opportunities they need. We need to create a large building maintenance reserve, so when something happens, we have the money to deal with it. We've gotten by without that, and it's starting to show, and we don't want to be in that position again. So altogether, all these things together come to about $10 million. So that's none of this is official yet, none of this is public, but we're talking about it, and we've hired a consultant to help us get going. We've actually been enlisting trustee commitments very successfully. We're up to about $500,000 so far. We just barely started, so I'm really optimistic that we're going to be we're really going to be cracking on this. You'll all hear more about this, I promise. Everybody in Knoxville will be hit on for this campaign, and it'll take everybody's support before this can happen. So there are a number of other campaigns going on locally, which I take as a good sign. To me, it says we all finally feel like we can stick our toe in the water again after being sort of shivering on the shore for several years, and there's a lot of pent-up need and a lot of pent-up demand that's bubbling up, and I don't see that as a negative necessarily. I think it will actually help us in the long term. So, we don't have time to go upstairs, but I would encourage you to go take another look at Higher Ground. Come back Friday for the Currents opening. I think you'll be really kind of amazed at what's been hiding down in the